Jenny, is there a Denver?
Please join me in Gasho. Naman Nobs, Naman Nobs, Naman Nobs, Naman Nobs. Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our spring Higan service. The Higan service is a service that is held around the equinox, and it's held twice a year, once during the spring and once in the fall. As you know, yesterday actually was the equinox, and today is so it was the first day officially of spring. Our weather here is turning spring-like, although today is cloudy and overcast. But the flowers are starting to come out, and the cherry blossoms are just starting to bloom here in Steeston. So welcome everyone from wherever you're joining us. And we'll begin this morning's service with a moment of silent meditation, followed by a recitation of the name of the Buddha or the Nembutsu. Naman Nobs, Naman Nobs, Naman Nobs, Naman Nobs, Naman Nobs. And we will now continue on with the reading, and I'm just going to bring it up right now. So for those of you who don't have it, I have it up there on the screen. And we're going to start off with the homages and three treasures. Homage. Hard it is to be born into human life. Now we are living it. Difficult it is to hear the teachings of the Blessed One. Now we are hearing them. If we do not gain emancipation in the present life, we may not be free from sorrow in the ocean of births and deaths. Let us reverently take refuge in the three treasures. We go to the Buddha for guidance. May we always walk in the way that leads to enlightenment. Everyone? We go to the Buddha for guidance. May we always walk in the way that leads to enlightenment. We go to the Dharma for guidance. May we be submerged in the depth of the teachings and gain wisdom as deep as the ocean. Everyone? We go to the Dharma for guidance. May we be submerged in the depth of the teachings and gain wisdom as deep as the ocean. We go to the Sangha for guidance. May we all with one accord live the life of harmony in the spirit of oneness, free from the bondage of selfishness. Everyone? We go to the Sangha for guidance. May we all with one accord live the life of harmony in the spirit of oneness, free from the bondage of selfishness. Even through myriads of kalpas, hard it is to hear such excellent and profound teachings. Now we are able to hear and receive them. Let us try to understand the Tathagata's teachings. Namandavs, 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 namandavs. We will now continue on with the reading, another reading. We're actually going to read today the Golden Chain together. So please join me. Again, I have it up on the screen if you don't have it with you. The Golden Chain of Love. I am a link in Amida Buddha's golden chain of love that stretches around the world. In gratitude, may I keep my link bright and strong. I will try to be kind and gentle to every living being and protect all who are weaker than myself. I will try to think pure and beautiful thoughts, to say pure and beautiful words, and to do pure and beautiful deeds, knowing that what I do affects not only my happiness or unhappiness, but also those of others. May every link in Amida Buddha's golden chain of love be bright and strong, and may we all attain perfect peace. Namandas. We will now have the Suture Chanting, and we'll begin with the chanting of the Sambujo, followed by the chanting of the Sambutsuge, both in the Japanese and then reading of the English translation. Again, the Sambujo is on your screen for those of you who may not have it printed out. Namandavs, 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 namandavs. Namandavs. Please join me in reading the English translation that you see at the bottom on your screen. We respectfully welcome Amida Buddha to our temple as we scatter flowers of joy. We respectfully welcome Shakyamuni Buddha to our temple as we scatter flowers of joy. We respectfully welcome the Buddha of all times and places to our temple as we scatter flowers of joy.
의교시가 이사이그그 이사다야 계시읍은 야그세 너그마 무료나이쇼 신여거자 그여 이사이 시도쇼붓 은여그도 겐쇼흑약 인여거자 쇼붓세가이 무흑하게 무시세즈도 오묘시쇼 행시쇼곡 녀세쇼지 이진난요 료가사붓 고그도나이치 거시기며 노조조셋 오그녀나여 님은도서 가노아이미 노다드이사이 지보라이쇼 신내드쇼조 이도가곡 게라그안노 오브드시며 내가 시쇼 오즈가노히 니기쇼쇼욕 집보세서 지혜무게 조려시서 지가신교 계려신시 쇼그덕그주 가교쇼지 묘도세
Naman Nobs, Naman Nobs, Naman Nobs, Naman Nobs, Naman Nobs. Please join me in reading the English translation. Again, for those of you who don't have it printed, it's on your screen. Sambutsuge translation, praises of the Buddha. Your face shines in great splendor, boundless wondrous dignity, such the greatness of your light, beyond all comparison. Brightness of the sun and moon and the shining mani jewels, when compared to your brilliance, seem to us like a blackest ink. Tathagata's countenance transcends all comparison. The great voice of awakening resounds throughout the 10 quarters. Your precepts, learning, effort, meditation, wisdom are virtues beyond all compare, ultimate, supreme, and rare. Your deep meditation has fathomed all the Dharma sea to the limits and the depth of all things the Buddhas teach. Ignorance, anger, and greed, the world-honored one has none. Like a lion among men, measureless your great virtues. Vast are your great virtuous deeds, your deep wisdom is profound. Your radiant luminous light shakes all the world's foundations. When I become a Buddha, equal to the Dharma King, I will transcend birth and death, liberating all beings. My giving, discipline, precepts, patience, and effort, meditation and wisdom shall be supreme, unsurpassed. When I attain Buddhahood, everywhere fulfill my vow, bringing peace and tranquility to all beings in doubt and fear. Though there are myriad Buddhas beyond measure, beyond count, and great sages numberless, like the grains of Ganges sand, I will honor each of them, equally accepting none. Even more importantly, I will seek the supreme way. Even though all Buddha worlds are countless as Ganges sands, even though all lands and realms are boundless without measure, yet my light shall reach them all and illumine every place. Such shall be my perfect work, such my power infinite. When I attain Buddhahood, my land will be first and best. Peace of practice transcendent, its people sublime and rare. My land is like nirvana, beyond all comparison. In my sincere compassion, I will enlighten all beings. All who come from 10 quarters to be born into my land will be pure, filled with gladness, peace, and great tranquility. O Buddhas of the 10 quarters, this my true revelation. In this way, I've made my vows, and I will strive to fulfill them. Buddhas of the 10 quarters, with your wisdom unimpeded, may I always call on you to reveal my intentions. Though my body undergoes so much pain and suffering, I will persevere and strive patiently and without regret. Namo Amidabs, Namo Amidabs, Namo Amidabs, Namo Amidabs. Namo Amidabs. Okay. Once again, good morning and welcome. I should ask this before, but you can hear me all okay, right? Okay, good. Before I go any further, I think I did put it up on your chat. There is a message that I sent out to everyone. Yesterday, I received information from Durgesh, one of our members here, about a webinar that's happening tomorrow night. It's sponsored by the foundation. I can't remember the name of the foundation, but at UBC, Jessica Main hosts it. It's a webinar on how YABA, or Young Adult Buddhist Association, and YBA, Young Buddhist Association, in the early years of Buddhism in North America, helped promote Buddhism. So long before people such as Thich Nhat Hanh or Dalai Lama became famous in North America. In fact, our organizations, the Buddhist Church of America, as well as then Buddhist Church of Canada, were the primary ways in which Buddhism was truly promoted to North Americans abroad. And so there's a webinar that's happening tomorrow night. And if anybody's interested, I did put up the link for that. You have to register. It is a Zoom webinar. So please look at the chat and you can join. I did send it out to those people who were in this study sessions. I sent it out last night to those people, but for those of you who may not have received it and who may be interested in it, please go to that link. Okay, now I'd like to begin my talk, and I will begin by reading a passage from the writings of Shinran Shoni. This actually comes from what's known as the Lamp of Latter Ages, and so I'll read this passage. The idea of Amida's coming at the moment of death is for those who seek to gain birth in the Pure Land by doing various practices, for they are practicers of self-power. The moment of death is of central concern to such people, for they have not attained true Shinjin. We may also speak of Amida's coming at the moment of death in the case of those who, though they have committed the 10 transgressions and the 5 grave offenses throughout their lives, encounter a teacher in the hour of death and are led at the very end to utter the Nembutsu. The practice of true Shinjin, however, abides in the stage of the truly settled, for he or she has already been grasped, never to be abandoned. There is no need to wait in anticipation for the moment of death, no need to rely on Amida's coming. At the time Shinjin becomes settled, birth too becomes settled. There is no need for the deathbed rites and prepare one for Amida's coming. Right-mindedness, then, is the settling of Shinjin of the universal primal vow. Because of the realization of the Shinjin, a person necessarily attains the supreme nirvana. Shinjin is the mind that is single. The mind that is single is a diamond-like mind. The diamond-like mind is a mind aspiring for great enlightenment. And this is other power that is true other power. Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu. I'll come back to this reading a little later, but to begin with, as you know, today is our spring Ohigan service. And I've mentioned in the past how the Ohigan is a time of balance in the universe. It's held at the time of the equinox. And of course, at the equinox, it is said that, the sun shines right over the equator. And so the length of daytime and length of nighttime is equal during the equinox. And depending on the seasons, it starts going into either summer or spring or the fall, right? And so now the spring equinox that we're in, we're going to get longer days and nicer weather coming to us. So a lot of people look forward to this time of year. In Japanese, there is the adage that says both the heat and the cold last only until Higan. Atsusa mo samusa mo ohigan made, which means, of course, that, in the spring equinox, as I just mentioned, we are going from the winter weather into more nicer weather. I've also mentioned in the past about how balance is very important in our Buddhist teachings. And we talk about the universe being in balance and how the earth receives the heat from the sun, but the sun, in order to heat itself, has to rotate at a very specific rate. And this is also dependent on the orbits of the planets around it as well. So not only are we receiving the sun, but the sun also heats up because of the very specific orbits of the planets. So we talk about balance. But in fact, the word Higan itself means other shore. And the Higan service is a service that is primarily commemorated as a Japanese Buddhist service. And in fact, this service was started in the 8th century. And it was started actually by the Emperor Kammu, or the first official Ohigan service was by an edict from the Emperor Kammu, who realized because during the Higan period, the sun sets directly to the west. So during the equinox, it said that the sun sets directly to the west. And of course, in Japan, by 8th century, there was already a belief in what we call Amida Buddha, having the Pure Land in the west. And so the Emperor Kammu actually ordered the monks to have chanting done or worshiping during this equinox. And it was over a period of 6 days that they would worship facing the west towards the setting sun. And of course, this is a way to pay homage to the ancestors who have gone ahead of us to the Pure Land. So, of course, this is referenced in both what we call a larger sutra on Amida Buddha, or the larger Skavati Vyuha Sutra, and as well as in the Amida Sutra that we, pre-pandemic, used to chant during our monthly memorial service, the Shotsuki service. In the Amida Sutra, it actually begins, one of the first lines of that sutra has Shakyamuni Buddha talking to the most elder of the disciples, Shariputra. And he says to Shariputra, beyond 100,000 kodis westward from here, there's a land called perfect bliss. In that land, there is a Buddha called Amida who is expounding the Dharma at this moment. So, from those sutras, it was gathered that, of course, that Amida's Pure Land is in the west. And so this service is not only about balance in a physical matter, but it is talking about the balance of life and death. The other shore is also referenced by Shantou, or Zendo Daishi, who is the 5th of our 7 patriarchs that we see on the very far left of our altar there. Shantou or Zendo was a monk who lived in China. And of course, the very famous parable of the traveler traveling to the west coming across the river of fire and river of water. And I've spoken a number of times on this, so I'll just very briefly, for those of you who may not be familiar with it, the parable that Shantou or Zendo gave was a parable to talk about what we call the entrusting heart or entrusting mind. And he starts off by talking about the traveler traveling to the west. And when he comes across this river, is a very unique river. To the south is a river of raging fire. To the north is a raging water. And in between those 2 rivers is a very, very narrow path, maybe 3 to 4 inches wide. So the traveler pauses, thinking maybe I should go back the way I came. But as he turns over his shoulder, he sees a bunch of bandits coming to attack him. So he realizes he can't go backwards, and he thinks maybe I should go up along the shores that he's on to see if there's another way to cross. And as he looks to the north and south, he sees wild beasts chasing after him. So he realizes he can't do that. So at that point, he feels stuck. He feels that there's this very narrow path in front of him, but with the river of fire and river water lapping over it, he can't go forward. And he realizes he can't go backwards. And he realizes even if he stays still, he's going to meet his certain demise. So at that point, we call it the three points of death. Can't go backward, can't go forward, can't stay still. And at that moment, he makes a decision that there is only one choice. There is this very narrow path. Despite the fact that there are perils ahead of him, he decides to take that path. And the moment he makes that decision, he starts walking forward. And at that time, he hears a calling voice from the other shore saying, "Come as you are, I will not let you fall." And he continues to walk forward. And then he hears the bandits from behind him saying, come back, we mean you no harm." But he doesn't turn back, he continues forward. And then he hears a different voice from the back, reassuring him, saying, "Follow that voice up ahead and you will get across." And he goes across and he's met by a good friend. And of course, this whole parable is talking about our journey of life, and the other shore being Amita's Pure Land, with the calling voice being the voice of Amida Buddha reassuring us. So this Higan, which means other shore, is referring to this other shore of Amida Buddha. So there is reference there as well. So coming back to that passage that I read at the beginning, which is Shinran Shonin's message, it was that at that time of Shinran, there were those individuals who felt that deathbed rituals, as well as how one dies, was primary in importance to the afterlife, what kind of place they will end up going to. And Shinran in this passage specifically says that there are those who rely on this deathbed ritual, and it is important for some individuals, people who may not have heard the Dharma until that point, they might find it of importance. But he says for those of true Shinjin, it is not the point of death that is important, but it is hearing the Dharma in the present, right now, right here. And it's when we listen to the Dharma that we begin to awaken to the reality of life. So in order to give an example of this, I wanted to share with you an incident or experience. This goes back to 2015. Many of you, I think, attended the World Buddhist Women's Convention in Calgary. I had the wonderful opportunity of participating in that convention as well. In fact, for myself, it was truly an experience because I was part of the working staff helping organize this World Buddhist Women's Convention. And as the working staff, everything went by like a blur. From before the convention, leading up to the convention, through the convention, I was truly kept going. One of the things that we did prior to the convention, of course, both my wife and I, Noriko and I, spent time translating some of the notes, like the keynote speakers. So I translated the keynote speaker, Nana Yanase. She was a Japanese-speaking keynote speaker, so I translated her Japanese into English. And then my wife Noriko translated Patricia Usuki's English keynote speech into Japanese. So there were many nights prior to the convention where my wife and I hardly slept. But it was really important to us to do this. So I remember it very distinctly. But as I mentioned, because of the whole being on the working staff, the whole convention seemed like a blur to me. But one of the things that did stick out for me was during so in the World Buddhist Women's Convention, for those of you who are not familiar with it, one of the things that they traditionally have is they call it a panel discussion, but it's more presentation by women from around the world. Usually there's a representative from Japan, a representative from Hawaii, a representative from mainland US, a representative from Canada, and then a representative from South America, primarily Brazil. Of course, these are the areas where we have major populations of Jodo Shinshu followers, and that's why those areas are represented. But each of these representatives from those areas will give sort of a presentation on their own experience with the Dharma. And there was one lady in particular that really struck a chord with me. Her name was Hatsumi Kamishibahara from South America, from Brazil. And she gave such a moving talk. Mrs. Kamishibahara had moved to Brazil when she was quite young. I believe she was around 18 when she moved to Brazil as a picture bride or a bride to an immigrant. And she had lived there 51 years at the time of the convention. And she had mentioned how she and her husband moved to a small village, not at Sao Paulo, but about 150 kilometers away from the Sao Paulo. And there they took to farming. And it wasn't an easy life by any means, but she got involved with the local Fujinkai, or Women's Auxiliary Chapter, at a small Buddhist organization there. And that's how she started getting involved with the Fujinkai, or Women's Association. And she said she was surprised when she went to her first National Women's Federation convention, as there were over 1,000 people in attendance. This is in Brazil. So they've got a large population of Japanese Brazilians. And so she kept on attending the many functions. But she said her life went along with some struggles, but it went on quite well. And her and her husband were able to raise a family with 2 children, and they had grown and become independent and adults. And she was saying that there was a time this would have been 2012, I guess, in October. And she said that her daughter had come back from Sao Paulo for a visit. And after they had a meal together, and her daughter had started on her trip back to Sao Paulo, her husband said that he was going to do a little more work on the farm, and he went off on the tractor, waving goodbye as he left, saying, "I'm off." And she said that was the last she saw of her husband, because as he went off to the farm, apparently he had an accident on the tractor, and he passed away suddenly. And she said all her life went dark that instant. Everything that she had believed in, everything, the will of her life, everything went dark at that moment. And she said, after that tragedy, there were many people who gave her kind words, warm words. And yet, she said, she didn't feel like doing anything or meeting anyone. And she went through the motion of grieving. She held memorial services every 7th day leading up to the 49th day. And it was after the 49th day that a minister who had been friends with him for a long time wrote her a letter of condolence. And in it, he said, "It is not like your husband has gone away someplace. He has successfully fulfilled his duty as a parent, as a husband, as a member of society. And as we turn to the land of the Buddha, the Pure Land, please take this to heart. And whenever you think about your husband, please recite Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu. She said, having read this passage over and over again, it suddenly dawned on her that her husband had not gone away, had not died and disappeared. But in fact, she thought, that's right. She was reborn into what we call Amida's Pure Land. And she realized that every time she put her hands together, that her husband was thinking of or was there with her. And so from that point on, she began to see life differently. From that point on, she began to understand the interconnectedness of life and death. And although we hear phrases such as where there's prosperity, so there must also be decline, where there's a meeting, so inevitably there must also be parting. She said, you know, when we hear those words, but when we're actually faced with it, it is truly difficult to understand. And yet, she says, through the teachings, through listening to the words of Shinran Shonin, and more specifically, the teachings of Amida Buddha, she realized that we do not have to part, that we can still be one together. And so she realized this oneness. And I think at that moment, for her, it was, as in the parable of Chantal, that was the moment she took that first step on that path, the white path, and she heard that reassuring voice of Amida Buddha. That was the moment when she was at the end of her wits. And yet, at that same instant, she received the compassion of the Buddha. And so as we come for this Higan service, this service about balance, as we come to reflect on both life and death. At this moment, right now, right here, we realize we are in the embrace of Amida Buddha. As I said in my opening passage, right-mindedness then is a settling of the Shinjin of the universal primal vow. Because of the realization of the Shinjin, a person necessarily attains the supreme nirvana. Shinjin is the mind that is single. The mind that is single is a diamond-like mind. The diamond-like mind is the mind aspiring for great enlightenment. And this is other power. That is true other power. Just as Mrs. Kamishibahara, in our lives, we encounter many causes and conditions that allow us to reflect on the teachings. And this all is the working of the Dharma, or the working of Amida Buddha. And so I hope you will take a moment today to reflect on this. And I'd like to close my talk with a recitation of the Nembutsu. So please join me in Gasho. Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu. Thank you very much, everyone.